year, more public school students, those are North Carolina's public school students, live in poverty, 53%. That's the 15th highest in the United States. At-risk students face daily challenges that impact their ability to transition into the school day and be prepared to learn. Poverty greatly impacts their ability to learn on a daily basis. Another dot from our original slide, the A through F school grades. We just talked about poverty, and now North Carolina has school letter grades. Guess which schools get the most D's and F's? Schools with large numbers of poor students. Our view is that these school letter grades do nothing more than shame teachers and students for being poor. A D or an F school is like that has a D or F slapped on the building is like a scarlet letter. And they don't tell the whole story of what is happening in that building. The grades are based 80% on student achievement and only 20% on student growth. There were some changes made to this law the last budget cycle. There is a new designation, A plus NG, and those are schools that already earn an A, but also don't have significant achievement or graduation rate gaps. At the other end of the spectrum, a change was made to the definition of low-performing schools. This change caused more schools to fall into the low-performing category. Under this new definition of a low-performing school, nearly a quarter of the state schools are now considered low-performing. This chart shows how traditional public schools were graded compared to charters. And private schools receiving taxpayer money through vouchers are not shown on this slide. That is because they're not graded. So they're getting taxpayer money, but they are not graded the way public schools and charters are graded. They're not required to give the same tests, and again, they're not graded, so they're not represented here. Charters have a higher percentages of A plus G and A schools, but they also have a higher percentage of F schools. The big picture here, however, is that grading of schools lays the groundwork for school closures and takeovers, as has been done in other states. And one of the items we're looking for in 2016 is called achievement school districts. And that would relate to school takeovers, and Yvonne's going to talk more about that in her portion. Yes, okay. And finally, this chart shows what we already know, that the A through F school grades directly correlate to poverty and wealth. Schools with less than 50% poverty overwhelmingly got the A's and the B's, and the blue lines show the schools with 50% or more poverty. Many got C's, but look at the spike in the D's and the F's. According to this, over 98% of the schools who got an F also have 50% more of their students in poverty. Yvonne's going to continue.
Okay, so I'm going to have to wing a tiny bit because I got ready for the part towards the end. But take a deep breath. Lynn did a great job, didn't she? That's a lot of stuff there. That's a lot of information, and I hope that later we can talk about it. And I think the most important thing that I want to say as I start to finish up some of this discussion.
Could you please get closer to the mic?
Okay, so I moved that away from me, right? Is that better? Okay. I'll take my shoes off so I'm not quite so tall, but it's kind of hard for me and Senator Tillman.
I think you like him already.
Okay. So what chart, what is that now, charter schools? Okay. So just a quick overview looking at charter schools. One of the things we've been talking about in terms of our school systems, the choices. So charter schools right now are tuition-free, independent public schools that are different in that they're exempt from some rules, and you probably already read about some of those. But we have 160 charter schools right now. There's 16 more charter schools that are coming that have already been approved to start next August, and 28 charters that have been approved for 2017. One of the things about charter schools is they only have to have half of their teachers to be certified, licensed. They don't have the same curriculum requirements. They aren't required to offer staff development. They are not required to offer transportation or lunch. They don't have the same discrimination rules in place. We do know that in North Carolina, that since 1997, when we've had 57 charter schools close. Most of these charter schools that have closed through their own decision. And I think a few of them have had problems and been kind of urged and nudged along to close, but both of them have been closed because they were not able to financially or exist, or they had problems with their enrollment. Virtual charters are new this year in North Carolina. The General Assembly put in a request and demanded that the Department of Public Instruction give at least 2 virtual school charter license. We have 2 that opened in 2015, K-12 Incorporated and Connections Academy. These schools are currently limited to enrolling 1,500 students. The online schools could roll as much as 6,000, that's their cap, and at a cost of $66 million by 2017. The one thing that was eliminated this year that was somewhat controversial was that the student attendance reporting was eliminated for virtual charters. You know, if you have your own children or you've worked in education, that the attendance is taken every day, reported every day, and so forth. And so they don't have that requirement. So that's been a little bit of a controversial issue for some. A quick look at school vouchers. As you know, we now have school vouchers, and Lynn talked to you a little bit about the money part, but school vouchers have created a loss of funding for public schools. As 70% of us in North Carolina, like me, do not have children in public schools, but we pay taxes. So one of the things that's always concerned me about vouchers is the lack of accountability, the lack of being able to see exactly where the money goes. In Wake County, I went to a recent Wake County Board of Education meeting, and at that meeting they were presenting the budget, and they had every single penny of taxpayers' money was listed in line items and where it was spent and what was reverted and so forth. So I like that as a taxpayer. So I'm not comfortable with the concept of not having accountability for my taxes. Not just for the money, but also the accountability and what happens to children. There's no evidence that private religious schools offer a higher quality education than public schools, and private schools are not required, as you can see. They don't have to have licensed teachers, they don't have to serve free reduced lunch, they don't have to provide special education, and they can select any students they want. The beauty of our public school system, is that any child that walks into a school is accepted into that school. And then the last thing is that some of the recent surveys showed that only 31% of Americans support vouchers. 70% of the United States school voucher money in all states go to religious schools. And last year in North Carolina, 85% of the voucher money went to religious schools. The income eligibility used to be income of $43,568. This year it was increased to income that would not be over $57,945. That was a pretty startling amount of money to me. Most families would not consider, would consider $57,945 a year as certainly above poverty. And the voucher expansion is one of the proposals that's in place right now is to expand the private school vouchers for K through 1 students from 35% to 45%. And the reason that's important is right now it's capped that they cannot be used for more than 35% of kids who are in K through 1, and they have to come from the public school system. Increasing that cap to 45% is kind of scary, because it means that if you're accepted in the voucher program, the voucher money in K or 1, grade 1, then you are guaranteed voucher money for the next 12 or 13 years. So when you increase that cap, you're not just, It's not just, oh, what's the difference between 35 and 45? You're making a very huge commitment for 12 or 13 years to fund that child in a voucher guarantee. So that's kind of a bit of a problem. Okay, so now I want to move into just the next one. Oh, is that the next one? Oh, golly. So we want to just do a real quick cap of some of the legislation that occurred this year. Now, it's kind of tricky talking about legislation that's passed and pending legislation with all these wonderful legislators here in the room, and I'm sure they're going to correct me when it's their turn, and I hope they will. Because one thing I do believe very much about your representatives, and most representatives that I meet in the General Assembly, is that they do care about public education. We have different views on how that ought to be best done, but I do believe that they care about the citizens of their community and they care about public education. So the couple things that happened this past year that I want to just make sure you knew about. One was that the teacher preparation program was changed, and now the education the programs that train teachers and prepare teachers, they have to have a minimum GPA and test score requirements for admission. That's a good thing, don't you think? I do. And they have to have formalized requirements for their student teaching experiences. Now, I think that is a good thing, and I think that it's a positive move towards improving teacher quality, and I think we're all okay with that. It's kind of the same example, though, of we're not making these same requirements for charter schools. We're not making the same requirements for money that goes to voucher schools, so it kind of bothers me that what's good for the goose is not helping, working for the gander here. The second thing is eliminating personal education plans. This was a controversial issue. A lot of people who work with students at risk were concerned about that. A lot of teachers wanted this PEPs eliminated. I think Senator Tillman can tell you about that. But the PEP was a plan, an educational plan that had to show academic improvement for children at various benchmarks. A lot of teachers felt like the paperwork of that requirement was too much, although they were certainly for benchmarks and showing that children were improving. So it was eliminated. I hope that we don't see children at risk falling between in the gaps here. I'm concerned about that personally, but I think that we need to be very seriously monitoring following that. The other thing was low-performing schools. I won't go into much of that to describe that with you, but to say that Lynn's already kind of covered it, changing the definition and making more schools low-performing certainly wasn't a morale lifter. It certainly did not recognize a lot of really hard work that teachers and parents are doing in their school system. And again, it doesn't really feel fair in that it doesn't really take in consideration growth. I have several cousins and family members growing up that had a lot of academic challenges, and they worked as hard on their homework and on their grades and on their academic life as I did. Their progress was not as significant as mine in terms of grades, but in terms of growth of where they were and where they went every year, it was significant. And when that doesn't get taken into account, it feels a little unfair. And I think that one of the things that I hope you'll seriously, deeply consider is these grades, these A through F grades. I've visited hundreds of schools across the state, and the one thing that really hurts children's feelings is what, these D's and these F's on their schools. And I think that we're holding children and teachers responsible for the end result, the outcome, when they're not controlling all the input that impacts the outcome. So that seems a little harsh to me. And I don't see that it's really doing any good, and I'm looking forward to hearing what others who are in elected positions, what they really think about this, because it seems like it's not working in our benefit. I also talked with 7 or 8 members of the North Carolina Chamber this past week, and of local chambers, and they really think these grades are hurting their recruitment of people to their community. They have said they've been getting questions of people saying, we looked at your layout of your county, And we looked and saw that you have 5 schools that have Fs and 16 schools that have Ds. And so we've got economic development people telling me that these grades are just taken so harshly and so in the wrong spirit. And so I just think it's something that I hope that